Welcome to this video from the Life with Their Career Chat series. We'll be looking at Radhika Jayaraman's journey over 40 years as an interior designer. She has a thriving practice now, and she talks joyfully of her journey. It wasn't always easy. It started with a lot of parental resistance. She wasn't sure where to study, and yet she pursued her dream, and now she's very happy as an interior designer. So stay on with us and hear this chat, understand her life experiences as she shares them. And for all of you who are looking at a career in design of any sort or any unconventional career, or even if you find that your career choice is different from what your parents are seeking, this is a good video to watch.
Interior design is always an exciting field and not much is known about it. So I'd love to understand how you started, Radhika. Firstly, welcome and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And we really look forward to learning from you. I personally look forward to learning. 40 years is a lot of wisdom. So tell us where it started, how it began, just your experience of being a designer out there.
Okay. So let me start from the beginning. When I thought of doing this, at that time, I guess I didn't have a good idea on what I really wanted to do. But I was very fascinated with spaces, shapes. Furniture was my, it used to interest me a lot. But I never realized that I just wanted to do this as a profession. Over a period, and it all started at a doctor's clinic. She used to have these very interesting pieces of furniture, which, in those days it was called mini boga style. And that's where the fascination set in to, understand these things. But being those days where we were not exposed to any social media or anything, you weren't clued in that you wanted to do this as a profession. But I really knew that I didn't want to do academics. That was not my forte. And which wasn't very, how would I say, taken in very well by my folks, or I should say my dad. My mom was still okay with what I wanted. As long as she said, you managed to make a living and you enjoyed it, it was fine. So that's the beginning where these interests came in. But by the time I finished my class 12, I knew I just didn't want to do it. And I just decided I will do interior design because it sounded interesting. So that was my choice, but it didn't happen as conveniently as I wanted it to happen. The first resistance came from my dad, who refused to even accept my decision. And he kind of said, no, you have to study further. You're very good at physics. You must do physics honors. And I just definitely didn't want to do anything with studies anymore. And it took me a lot of, how would I say, I had to, kind of convince him, and it was going to be a tough task. So I just enlisted my grandfather's support, and he's the one who actually helped me in this process. My grandfather just asked one thing out of me. He said, you're my first grandchild, and you must become a graduate. And those days we didn't have degree programs for interior design. It was a diploma. So he said, no, you must do a degree. So I said, okay, I will do a degree, but just get me into it. So being the kind of families we come from where the patriarch has a full say, I just got permission. That was the beginning of the first, it was almost a first step. But I mean, I would say the process was very easy because my father was very upset with me. And he said, okay, he will pay my fees. But there was so much more than the fee, which I didn't realize when I got in. So every day you walked into the college and, you had different material, different things. So you needed it to be funded. So then I had to approach my mother and enlist her support. And lucky for me that she decided to back me up. So that's how I got into the process of getting an admission. And when I went to the college, the most interesting thing was I was wanting an admission, and I had a principal and head of the department sitting across and explaining it to me why I shouldn't be getting into all this. And then this place was like a finishing school for girls to get married. And I was really very, very upset. And my father was very thrilled that people were dissuading me to do something. So it was like, I told him it's all right. I will still continue to follow this. So that's how I entered the Polytechnic. And I must say that, the entry was so much, so after so much resistance, I thought like I won a war. That's how I went to my first day of college. That made me enter the working situation in the second year, which again was very nice because when you start working, your world in the college and what they teach you is your basic grounding, but you really don't realize that what you study is not actually what the world is. It's like you're in a cocoon and suddenly you're thrown to the world. The transition is very drastic, and how would I say? It's not what anything what you study in college, to be very honest. Your college, you learn, it's like you're doing ABCD and suddenly somebody puts you into a literature class and says, now talk about this, either talk about uh, uh, what you call a poem or talk about some literature. It's like it's so different. I mean, the gap is too wide. So when I first started to work, I started to assist my profs on various of their projects. You do little bit of work. They probably won't. I didn't earn at that time, but they gave me a very good experience. It was very interesting to understand what the real profession entails. So you started to, how would I say, grasp the nitty-gritties of actual working. You learned a lot because you had so many seniors working, you had so many people with so much of experience. Even they were students, but you had seniors, SPA students. We had our seniors who were working. So you learn small. You were like it's like kids. You are holding a kid's hand and teaching them. They were hand holding us and teaching us. So the second year was totally with our profs and all. You learned a lot. So that came when I came into my final year. I was like, I had like from a caterpillar I'd almost bloomed to a butterfly. It was like that, like I was far ahead of my classmates and I was doing much better than them because I had a good understanding of the actual work which happens outside. The third year I started to work. I started to actually earn, which was another thrill for me. It was a new thing. You don't get the opportunity to earn, and every rupee seems to be like you were earning a huge amount. It was like a pot of gold, but it was fun. I mean, you also started to understand a client's requirement, and you start, though I didn't do very big projects, I used to do small furniture and small things. But again, your interaction with client, understanding their needs and trying to accommodate their needs, because when you are in college, people give you project when it's only you and it's your thought, your design, your ideas, but you do not have to have a client who's going to like what you like. So it's very important to integrate their requirement, their likes, and your expertise, and then start working. So slowly I started to learn that side of the business. So by the time I was out of my 3 years and I graduated, I was reasonably set for my journey into the profession. And I must say here, I was very lucky that I got a subject of my choice, a profession of my choice. And I don't think I regret even one day of my so many years doing what I'm doing. That's according to me, that's a most important thing a person must remember when they choose their profession. It is very important because then it is not a task, however difficult it is. And the once you enter the real world, the challenges were plenty. We were, when I came out, I thought I'll get a job because I had 2 years of exposure to the industry, but nobody gave me a job because I was a female. That was my biggest setback. No architect wanted to hire me because they were not at all happy having a female person working with them. It was a liability. because all these professions, though they sound very interesting, glamorous, it's hard work and long hours. So if you're late, then there is no way they can ask a female to stay back that late. So that was a real tough challenge I had to overcome. So that's where, searching for a job became another challenge. So the first time I went for a proper interview was through my father's friend's colleague. His son got me an interview. So I said, okay, let me go. And my father escorted me to that place. The person was very sweet. He entertained us and he spoke. Then he asked me, where is your portfolio? This was my first time. And I had gone, with nothing. And I just walked in and I had a resume written like everybody goes for a job. And then he asked me for a portfolio. I said, what's that? And he said, didn't you work in your college? So I said, yeah. So he said, you're supposed to carry your work in present. So I just was like, I said, God, I have to come back again for this interview. Then I said, don't you have a studio? He said, yes, it's on the top floor. He said, let's go. Whatever you ask, I can do and show. I can tell you what I know. And he was a very elderly person. He thought he'll humor me. He took me to his studio. And then during the course of my interview, asked me a lot of questions. And those days, you had no computers. So you had to draw everything out. You had to scale everything out. So, it was a very long interview, thanks to my own stupidity that I never carried a portfolio. But it was really good fun because, we got to know each other so well. And he was very happy with my confidence. I don't know whether he was very happy with what I produced, but he was totally happy with my confidence because I said, okay, you ask and I will do it for you. That part of it is what I think made him hire me. So I got my first job like that. So after I think I spent a year and a half over there and then moved on. So each time I changed, I think I changed a couple of times. But those days it was not considered, job hopping was never considered very good. People won't hire you if you do too much of job hopping. So when I went to my second place of work, I had a lady boss, which kind of made it really nice because she was your kind of, she was your gender and she understood your problems. And it was a great time. And she had come back after studying abroad and, she had really good projects. So that was, I think, I would say one of my best phase in career where I learned a lot, because she had brought in a lot of knowledge from outside. And with our kind of, the kind of exposure I had in the Indian market, Indian architects. So it was a very interesting blend that, that kind of, I think that was where my whole, I would say my groundwork was complete. There I just kind of, I would say I was definitely after finishing there, I was qualified to be an interior designer. Till then, you learned. So that few years with her was a big thing. And from there, I set up a department in another place and then, started to work. Then onwards, it was like you rose up. So till I worked for 25 years, it was like a very good time. And I had all kinds of projects. I had huge commercial projects. I did malls, I did hotels. So and I would say that, you've done one thing, everything. Every project was a learning process. And every work you do is new. You would have thought, I've spent so many years, so I must be knowing that. Then you just step out and start. You say, okay, it's from zero. You learn something or the other every time. And, it actually you grow as you work. Every project is different. Every client is different. Every requirement is different. So it's like a new story every time you start. Then came the technology. We were all on drawing boards and things like that. Then came the computers. That was our biggest nightmare in the beginning. You didn't know how to work on that. And then, when you work on it, in a board, you quickly changed it and you knew how to do it. on a computer unless the operator understood what you wanted and did what that, it used to take hours. So, at 9 out of 10 times, you'll say, look, pal, you keep doing while let me do my work. So for a long time, you parallelly worked on two medium, you know. So I would say till maybe mid 90s, we did two medium. Then one moved completely to the computer. Their own, that again is very interesting because you could do a lot of things with the computer, and the software gave you the advantage of see what you were going to get, which never happened with, you did have three-dimensional perspectives and all, but it's never real. But with computer, you started to actually see the space. So I would say, the technology added on your skills. Though people like us who have spent so much time sketching, we still go back to our boards and we still go back to our paper pencil to, work. We are not very good at thinking with the computer, but it's definitely a beautiful medium to, express yourself. So we had two-dimensional, three-dimensional, then you had walkthroughs. So finally, like you say, we can now say we have also arrived. It's like you discover every day, new materials, new way of using materials. Everything is like, art. And, then the other interesting aspect is to work with the craftsmen. That's another challenge, to get them to convert your thought into reality is another aspect, which is a very difficult, but a very fulfilling aspect, because unless, you can design shitload of things, but you never ever can, feel good till you have converted it. So that conversion and to explain and work with the workers is again an interesting thing. I remember when I started, I would have carpenters and contractors who were very much older to me. I would be like the grandkids' age, and they would they would hear me out. They can't, the protocol was such that they'll just put their hand and say, Acha ma'am, Acha ma'am. They know I was talking absolute nonsense because it wouldn't happen that way. Then they will say, Aapko kya chahiye? And my Hindi was very bad those days, So I would try and explain to him with my Hindi, English sketches and everything. And they would say, okay. And he'd say, I remember one of the guys saying, he says, beta, ye aise kiya jata hai. Aap jaise bol rahe ho, aise ho raha, sab kharab ho jayega. That's how you learn. Then the factories you went to workshops, you start, those people were nice enough to teach us how to work with our hands also. So you learned each process, you did it yourself. That's something you do it on your own. Nobody tells you to do it. But it's really good if you can do hands-on, some amount of hands-on work on all these things. You really understand and learn the processes. Then you are, you also are able to convert things much better. So that is another very, very big aspect of this profession. It's nice to think, design, but the conversion is another. And the most important aspect of all is money. You have to do the whole thing in a budget. Nobody gives you so much money to blow. So you have to try and fit it. So, your thought process is you have to have a design, you have to have certain things, and you have to also choose material which gives you the effect and is not expensive or is within the budget the client prescribes. So that's the other thing you learn. Though we have engineers there, but a designer must know all these things. Unless you have exposed yourself to each stage of work, you don't succeed as a professional. So this whole thing is what I would say makes a good interior designer, and also the ability to accept that you're learning every day.
If you were to look out for the interior design streak in a child, or if you were to, speak to somebody who seems to be interested in design or doesn't know what to do, is creative, What is it? Is there something that helps them understand that, okay, I can look at this as a career?
You can't say that you will become you can look at somebody's choices and all and say they can become a designer. Whether they can become an interior designer is a very tough thing. That has to, you can't actually identify a child and say you can become an interior designer. I have had so many batchmates who started as interior designers, today are fashion designers, they're graphic designers, they've gone into various streams, but then that design element sustains. You can identify a designer because it's the way they choose colors, it's the way they choose when they look at things and how they describe a thing, you would know whether they have ability to design. Not most people have some amount of aesthetics and knowledge about colors, shapes, sizes, but if you watch a designer, there'll be those subtle things which they do which nobody would have even thought of. It's the way they arrange. You can see somebody who arranges a table. There'll be that subtle difference. Everybody arranges a house. Everybody arranges a table. It's just the small, small things which would highlight whether they have design skills or not. You can watch them and you can say, okay, they have a future in design. But you can't say whether this person's going to go into garment or... It's very difficult. It's also, as they grow, what passion they have towards that particular thing. But very difficult to identify saying you will only be an interior designer or a garment designer, because most of the people who design have this ability to work on other fields also. So I would say, you can only identify a designer. You can't identify a garment designer or a jewelry designer or an interior designer unless and until the person expresses their wish to do a particular thing. A bit difficult. You can't look at a 10th class, 12th class and say, okay, you will be very good at it. But yes, if people have very good sense of proportion, they love spaces, then they are the best for being architects or interior designers.
You would have worked with architects as well as interior designers, right?
Yes.
So how do you see them both as professions who, are overlapping as well as different?
Yeah, see, architect does with the buildings, okay? They talk about spaces in larger spectrum. Whereas I would say we look at spaces, I would say our essence should be form and function. And we say form follows function. That's how I design my spaces. So you have a huge canvas and we start putting things together, but they create that canvas. That's how I would say.
That's a nice way of expressing it.
It's like a body and a heart. The body is the building and heart is us, our designs.
Wonderful. A lot of people tell me that you need a lot of maths to be able to do interior design. You should be good at maths. Is that true? Is that a myth? What do you say?
No, you must know basic math, but you do not have to be very good at it. I would say I'm very bad at it. I'm very bad with numbers. The only place I struggle is when I do estimates. But otherwise, you don't need math, as in you do not have to be you don't need advanced math. You need basic math. If you have been successful to get through your 7th, 8th, you're good enough. It's probably you're, being more scientific about it, but design doesn't require so much of science. It requires a certain amount of science, but it doesn't require science as in science.
So design requires a sense of aesthetics, a sense of space, basic mathematical ability, ability to work with multiple people who have very different needs and wants, from your customer to your craftsperson to the architect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no, you have to work with, it's not just that. You have to work with architects. You have to work with people who design your lighting, your air conditioning, your plumbing. Lighting doesn't just It's not just lighting, it's the electricals. So it's not as simple as to say that, if when you design, your aesthetics is one side. When you incorporate all these services, the story changes. A lot of time you think of, a particular proportion, and these people come and completely change it. They say, no, we want to do it this. There is no way you can, you can't tell an air conditioning guy from a 3 feet space you come to 1 feet, because his machine won't function. So you work around with them. And nowadays you have fire, you have sound systems, you have noise reduction. So you have multiple things which you have to add on. And slowly as you work, you learn about these. You have to work with the building structure, because you don't know which thing, unless you don't know a bit about it, you don't know where you can break, where you can't, where you can tinker. So that's also essential. So you don't come into the field with all this knowledge, but you learn it over a period. And it's not impossible. You kind of, over a period, you do learn. There is no choice. You adapt yourself. And there comes a time you're as good as them, Only thing you're not qualified.
You mean you're as good as the electrician and the craftsperson?
No, you're as good as the electrical consultant. You may not be able to compute the loads and all, but you would be very good to say, okay, this is the flow, this is the positioning, this is the distribution. That is something you can manage. I mean, you cannot take over their job, but you are as good to, so when you design, you always incorporate that, and you're prepared for their presence in your design. So it's much easier. You can't replace them, but at the same time, now you are in a position to accommodate them much better. I went for a project presentation, I went to one of an established builder, where the owner and one of the executive director was there. I remember presenting. I know I had spent a couple of days putting together the project, and I went there and I presented it, like I was thinking, oh, I've done such a good job. I went and made a presentation. And when the whole thing by the time I finished, they had ripped my project apart. There was not a portion which they said is right. He had actually torn the whole thing out. And by the end of it, I mean, short of crying, I mean, I was like completely, I said, if anybody said a word more, I would, holler. I had reached that point, and I finished everything. And then he said, come on, let's have lunch. I was thinking, man, this man has torn me apart, and now he's expecting me to eat. Anyway, I had no choice. I was very young, and you can't say no to. They're big people, and for us, they were larger than life, because we were very young. And when somebody says, and he's your client, so ultimately, you say, okay, I have messed up with this work. So when I sat down for this, I just couldn't eat, I was just struggling looking at my plate. So he told me something very interesting. He said, you worked very hard. So I said, what is the point? When he said, no, the fact that we spent 3 hours debating your design and we discussed so much. He said, this is a huge organization I run. I mean, I do projects worth crores. If I'm willing to spend 3 hours with you and discuss something, that means you put in a lot of work and your work was worthwhile. I don't think I have ever been paid such a compliment ever. It was something very big for me. Also taught me a lesson that you do not have to succeed every time. People do not expect you to, be correct on the first shot. At the same time, it also taught me the lesson that, your work, whatever you put in, the other person, if he's knowledgeable, he does understand. And that was a big, big, high lesson, everything put together. And he was a very big builder in the city, So from a man who has so much of experience in his life, to be explained this. I mean, he's sitting with you, having a meal and explaining this to you. I thought like, oh, maybe I have done something. That's the first time after the whole presentation and everything. First time I thought, okay, I had done some work. It really taught me. Subsequently, I always, whenever I put in my work and I had these, I could deal with it better. First time the open office concept came into India. So we were doing this and we were doing public sector. Public sector, all those senior people never like to sit outside in the open. So you have to make it an open office, yet give them cubicles. So when we were doing this particular project, one side of the building collapsed. For whatever they were doing, a side of the building collapsed. And then these people called and the GM called and he said, you please come immediately. Anyway, didn't know much about a building. So I was just thinking, I was a junior designer at that time. And then I called our chief engineer. And I told him, sir, they're telling us to come immediately because the building has collapsed. So he looked at me and he said, what are you? I said, I'm a designer. He said, we are not medical service, or we are not in the essential service. We are consultants. The building has collapsed. Tell them to call a fire brigade. Tell them to call if there is an injury, call an ambulance. And then we will go tomorrow and we will review and tell them what went wrong. It's not our job to go and do all this. So that's the first time I realized that I should define my work. I don't have to be present everywhere. And it's what is not my scope. I shouldn't be involved. Oh, this is not my work, and I'm not supposed to be poking my nose everywhere. So it also, as you work and you meet your other counterparts who are your senior, they teach you how to define your scope of work, where to, participate, where to withdraw. It's very interesting how you evolve yourself as a person also. All these things also make you a person who knows how to draw your lines in real life. Also, these all these growth processes also actually builds your character over a period. You realize, okay, this is not my thing, I don't need to be involved. It's fine, I'm there but not there. It's not for me to say something. So it's very interesting how our profession shaped us. I mean, there are a lot of us who are very different as youngsters. Now we're very different people. I mean, even our workers who've been with us so long, they always say you've changed. So which is a compliment, that you've learned your diplomacy, you've learned you've got involved in their lives, but yet you maintain your distance, which is very, what do you say? You feel good about it, that that you've, as a person, you've grown. Should never get disappointed with yourself, where you should say, okay, I have not done this correctly, I should redo it this way the next time. You shouldn't really feel dejected or something like that. I mean, if I think if I had done that, I would never have succeeded. The fact that every time somebody said something, I would really ponder and say, okay, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing this. You should try and say, whoever says something to you, just go beyond what they say. Don't get offended and don't feel belittled. Or I think you should just know that, if you have a boss or you have a senior or who says something, even it could be your junior also coming up with things which actually make you reflect, then it's very important to take it in well. It's not a brick bat. That's how you shouldn't be looking at it. You should be looking at it as a caution, or you should say, okay, I must at least think about it. Maybe you can't adapt everything everybody says, but at least you understand the essence and try and incorporate as much as it's possible, because everything everybody says can't be incorporated. But you should know what you can accommodate and do well. It's a, how would I say, it's a ladder to success. If you follow these small things, it's really helps you to, as a person, you respond much better. When you start, I feel that, commercials is not the first thing you should look at. You should give yourself an year or so just to groom yourself into the real world. So it doesn't matter what you start with. I mean, nowadays, most of the kids start with at least a 15, 20K easily. So 20K, according to me, is good enough if somebody's paying you to treat that 1 year as an internship. And then move on. And most of the time, once you've done a couple of years, you start, you are more aware, you are much better in the way you deal with things. So you are paid much better. Not like my time where, it was not so good. I mean, I would have spent 10 years to get 10K. Whereas now people are getting good salaries, they start off with good salaries, and the consultants are paid decently well. When I was working, initial days we weren't paid very well, but now all the kids are paid well. Any designer after say 10 years starts earning well, and give yourself 10, 12 years, you really start making money. It's not difficult to make. People start freelancing also simultaneously when you're working. So that also adds to your exposure as well as finances. So you do decently well. And anybody who has spent in 20, 25 years in the profession is actually making good money. So I won't say it's a bad business. It's the starting is a bit slow in our kind of a profession. Or I would say anything which has to do with design, art, the initial years are a bit, if you could call it a struggle, or you could call it, a low paid situation. But otherwise, post that, you do well. You actually make good money. Sometimes you make much better money than people who are in those corporate segment. If you're really, really ambitious, and you can actually mint money in this profession. It depends on how you approach the thing. I've done very well. I started with very less salary, and I started at 500 rupees a month. To today, I even without marketing myself, without troubling myself, I make good money. I don't have to struggle to make money. It's only thing is you have to establish yourself. Once you establish, people come to you, and these are things which they last very long. Client list is something they either stick to you or don't stick to you. And they would surface some point or the other, they come back to you, because the comfort level with a client is very important.
Is it possible for you to give us like broad categories of how much a person can on an average earn from your knowledge? We're not going to hold you to it. In the beginning, you said about 20, 25,000
20, 25, one starts
is the
with.
beginning. And
Is
then
the
when you
beginning.
reach about 10 years, then what
10
is the...
years, you can do a couple of lakhs easily, maybe even up to 4 to 5 a month.
Okay. Yeah.
If it depends on how where you're working, with whom you're working, and how you're working.
Fair
You could
enough.
do between 2 to 4 lakhs in 10. But
Yeah.
post that, it's a open thing. After you spend 10, 15 years, you can just earn any amount. You can just earn any amount, because it depends on the scale of project you're willing to work on. See, all depends on you. How much you're willing to put in and how much work you're willing to take in. So if from there on, it's an open this thing. You can earn anything from 10, 20, 30 lakhs a month. Most of the people don't reach there because this is an industry which looks glamorous from outside, but it's hard work, and it's too much of uncertainty. So you always restrain yourself beyond a point to say, okay, I don't want to push myself that far. Unless you start having organization where you have your partners, then you can do. But you earn well. I mean, you really do well. It's very difficult to be an interior designer and not earn well. I mean, you must be real disaster, or you must be, the other end of the spectrum who is not willing to adapt at all. But otherwise, it's not possible that you won't earn well.
Yes, learning to adapt is something that every professional needs to do.
True.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
something unique to it. But here, since it's design related, sometimes it's a struggle, because a client's choice might be very conflicting.
Have you had very tricky such situations? Because I've heard
Oh,
you
I
say
have,
it a few
I have. Like
times.
when I say this, when I gave you the example of that magenta, that was actually happened with me. So somebody who was very fond of that color, and I just couldn't believe that I had to talk about that color. Initially, just like I struggled to even accept the fact that somebody wants me to do that. And then, when I actually sat down and thought about it, I said, okay, I need to do it. I just did it. And I actually made a living room piece, which was in magenta, and then rest everything to conflict it or, complement it. And to my surprise, it turned out really good. So that's when I decided, I'm not going to shut doors and say, okay, this is not looking. I never thought I was capable of implementing something like that. And even to my own self, it was good. So, it's not necessary that what you think is always right. Sometimes somebody else's thought process, if you start converting, you might just use it very well. So that's where I'm saying it's sometimes a struggle within yourself, but if you're willing to take that chance, you do well.
Yeah, I've heard you say this many times now, and I think it's been a constant adaptation for each and every client, right? Especially
Yes.
when you find somebody who's very different from your tastes, your aesthetics.
9 out of 10 are like that. 9 out of 10 are like that. See, you have two people to adapt. One is if the client. The second person are your consultants. They are a constant challenge. They make your life, as I put it, very miserable, because there are things they cannot compromise. You cannot compromise with your lighting, you cannot compromise with your fire, you cannot compromise with your air conditioning, you can't compromise with your plumbing, you can't compromise with your structures. These are, and when you have to try and design and get them to adapt to your thing, it's a huge challenge. You might be the best designer in this world, but unless you are able to take them along with you, you're never going to succeed, because nobody wants a beautiful place where the aircon is not working or the light is not enough. Then it's a disaster, however well you do it. So the essential thing is they are the other set of people whom you have to adapt to. So sometimes it's just not designing is not the most important thing. Sometimes understanding them also is very essential.
Like right now, I'm in a space wherein if even a friend will buy a house and set it up, she will hire an interior designer, which was unheard
Yes.
of some years back. So I see that shift in my environment. Of course, corporates always had interior designers. How is it for you as a professional? Do you see a change in the amount of, demand, so to speak?
See, demand has come in because the supply is very high. Nowadays, there are so many designers. In my time, we were unaffordable in the sense people, either the corporates or very big business houses hired us, or people with lots of money who it's like we were a luxury item. Now we have become a necessity in the sense now the space is less, your requirements are more, so you need a professional to help you. So the demands come because of that also. Maybe sometimes hiring a person actually saves you a lot of money. Previous you had good vendors, and anybody would get a couple of cupboards made. You never thought beyond that. You said, okay, I have a space, put few cupboards, put few things, and I'm sorted. But now what happens is an individual has too many things and he has too less a space, so he has to fit in everything and also live. And nowadays we are also more conscious how we live. Previously nobody bothered. you know if you look at a typical Indian household, who bothered about a living room, a dining room? Nobody thought about all those things. If people come, there's a divan and everybody sits there, talks, and goes away. But today you have a formal dining and formal this. The whole thing, your whole lifestyle has changed. Everybody has a particular lifestyle and they look forward to a certain way of living. So the need of professional has increased. Also, that people don't have so much time. Nobody wants to spend hours. Previously, a person would go stand there, look at his house, get it made, buy things. Nobody wants to do it anymore. So that's the other reason why the thing has changed. So there's a lot of change. There's a lot of change because of the way people approach life now and the lifestyle changes which has happened. Also, there are a lot of people available and they have become affordable.
How is it? I mean, is there any part of you that does sustainable interior design, or how is that area? Is it there, or is it just a lot of, noise?
Sustainable is like we still do that. I mean, most of the clients like to. I mean, sustainability to the extent that we reuse, recycle a lot. A lot of our clients don't mind that. But if you are working with the builder community or somebody, you do not get that opportunity because those are new buildings. People, if you're working with old buildings or old offices where they're shifting, then it happens. And all this people talk about green building, they save energy. You technically don't. I mean, it's something I would say happens to an extent where the norms are set. You follow the norms. They say it works, but all those norms are not applicable. These are international norms. Every country has a different climatic situation. So sometimes I feel that they don't hold good. It's a debatable topic, but from my perspective, I think there's all this green building business. You do a green building, you want the sunlight to control your lights, you want the sunlight to control your, solar things. But then for the solar thing to happen and the sunlight to happen, you have to have so much of glass, which means you're increasing my air conditioning capacity for the building. And I increase the air conditioning. Air conditioning, you increase, that means there's so much of discharge in the atmosphere. It has its own impact. So I don't know which way. I mean, in a way, you save energy, and in a way, you pollute the environment. I would say if we go back to our old style of construction, that would be much better because those buildings which were, Lutyens' time and the old buildings were definitely far better and far more. Those were actually sustainable, because you use less air conditioning. You were very well ventilated, you had good light, you used the natural resources well. They were far better building. All these glass buildings and all a disaster. I mean, our climatic conditions don't allow us to make it sustainable. I mean, if I were to say sustainable, I would say you recycle your resources, you try and, make the best use of whatever you have available, locally available, and use local material, use local style of buildings. That would be a far better concept. But then, we come into picture only after the building is done. So technically, a green building is not something we are part of.
Right.
Not from the design perspective, but from the working perspective, it's changed a lot. When I started, we used to make the drawings by hand. So if I made say a plan, and I planned a building in a particular way, I laid it out to the client, and he says, no, I don't want this. I want it different. So when you're attempting your alternatives, you have to draft every time. So just think of it. One change means you have like your plans change, your elevations change, so much changes. That the technology has really helped because now you layer off. It takes me 10 minutes to change and give it to the client. It's not like I'm spending days, I'm just say 20 drawings, you just make one change in one drawing, the others get automatically altered, and you are in a much better position. So that way, I would say technology has really eased our working. And today they say AI is helping. Yeah, again, there I would say if I lay out a certain requirement and I start the process of saying, okay, this is how the design has to progress, the AI might help me in that. But I don't think in thinking process, AI will ever replace a human being because they cannot be sensitive to another person's needs. They cannot understand those things very well. So it's a very good tool. I would say technology is an excellent tool, but I won't say it would ever replace a designer ever. Yes, they are excellent tools. They help a lot. They facilitate a lot. They have cut our timelines phenomenally. But I don't think they'll ever replace a designer. It's never possible. You just think of it. Just think of a small space like a in a house, a kitchen. Okay, all of us cook food, but everybody's way of using the kitchen is different. So that says it all. How can an AI? I mean, for an AI, you say wash, cook, clean, stack. It'll just put in an order. It doesn't matter whether it's you or me. And if you have the time and the energy to start working on each detail, I mean, even if you take a small place like a kitchen, you have 200 things which you have to incorporate. AI can never think so much. You watch your client and you say, okay, this is the way the person works, then you convert it. You think of an office. An office is an office for this thing. It'll just lay out tables. But every organization has a different way of working. So everybody's requirement of the table is different.
What technology tools do you use currently? Like,
we use AutoCAD, we use 3D perspective for perspectives, and we do walkthroughs. Essentially that.
And when you moved like from a hand-drawn thing to a computer automated thing, I do remember there was a time when you were doing both. Did you see any people, any amount of delayering or jobs being lost because of that transition, or there was nothing really? It was just reskilling.
No, there wasn't. People just, people.
Learned.
That transition was quite smooth, because for a long time the hand drawing had to exist, and by the time technology came into position, these guys had mastered the art of doing it. So it just doesn't make a difference in that. There wasn't so much of
So your
a difference.
take as an expert is technology is beneficial, it's helpful, and there's no need to really worry about it. I mean,
Yeah, you do. You should.
yeah.
You should.
Okay, that's good to know. If you had to take a fresher, somebody who's patient, willing to learn,
No, who is willing to commit themselves? If they're serious about growing in their profession, if even if it's a fresher and say, okay, I'm willing to put in 1 year and I'm willing to learn, then it's worth working with them. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. It's
is
really
that the
waste
reason
because
why lots of times nowadays for internships people actually charge money? It's been
yeah.
a trend now.
I'll tell you what, you spend a lot of time, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's not convenient. It's really not convenient. Internships sometimes consume, unless you're a very large organization and you have a huge amount of people there who are willing, there might be some 1 or 2 people whom you can assign to do this work, then it's all right. But if you're smaller organizations, you just cannot afford them. You don't have the time for all this. Because our profession is very demanding. Whatever time you are, you're constantly on the move, and you have to think on your feet. So you just don't have the time to babysit people. But unfortunately, see, in our time, we used to work free. When we used to join a company and we felt that we didn't know much, we would work free. And we were willing to put 1 or 2 years of our time, and we used to commit to the company. Today, what happens is a person graduates, comes, spends 6 months, and then they push off. So somebody who has invested 6 months has got nothing out of them, and you've spent a lot of time. So it's not, and also the other person hasn't learned very much, because the next person who's going to take them in is also going to struggle with them. They should change their approach to work. See, when we were freshers, we were also taken in, no? But the person who hired us knew this person is going to be with me for 4 years or 5 years. And I have spent 1 year grooming them. I will get 3 years back from them. I would have, got value for my money and time spent. And we never questioned our seniors. That's a different way of learning. I might sound very what you say, old fashioned in this, but that is very important. You are supposed to, learn when you come out. You have the time to make money. You do not have to see. What happens is all these people come out and they compare themselves to the corporate world. We are very different. Corporate world, there is a stagnation. This is one industry where you don't ever stagnate. If you have the will to earn, you can earn till whatever age you want. But the point is, the initial years you have to really give in and groom yourself. So it's fundamentally the freshers should commit themselves. That is where the difference will lie.
If you enjoyed this video, the Life Vidya series, and found it informative, do share, like, and subscribe to our channel for more updates. See you next time.